when someone is in a situation where they have no way out, that's when a transformation happens. So you asked me why didn't I ever quit? Because my back was always against the wall and I never had a way out. So I never quit, and that's how I became what I became. So no quitting is not only because there's no alternative, but because it makes you who you are. Put yourself in a situation with no way out.
Right.
Because then what you do is you fight. And when you fight, you become the human you become the optimal person that you can be.
Hello and welcome back to the Better Human Podcast, a podcast about making humans better humans and demystifying the world of relationships, communication, and entrepreneurship for your better life. Today we are joined by the one and only an outstanding businessman and a self-made multimillionaire whose name has been on the front page in the Globe and Mail, National Post, CBC Television, and other sources of mainstream media, Mr. Gary Lipovetsky, the one and only. Gary is an outstanding entrepreneur, and during the course of the past 15 years, he's co-founded truly successful internet businesses like menupalace.com, dealfind.com, and of course, the well-known Valeria Inc., where you are co-founders and partners in. Gary attributes his success to his core strategy of keep going. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. And he's an amazing digital entrepreneur that's going to share his advice and his experience. And of course, father of three to Jake, Ben, and Max. Let's start the conversation by jumping right into the impact session where we get to know our guest, Gary, a little more.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So let me start with this question. You've got a couple CEOs. What do you look for in a CEO?
First things first is I've learned to invest in the hiring process. So whereas before I thought it would be crazy to pay the fees that professional recruiters charge, now I understand the value of it, but you have to have the right recruiter.
Right.
So first things first, from a very practical perspective, I invest in the recruiting process. So I get a proper recruiter who will source people and who will vouch for them professionally, who know where and in a lot of the cases, these recruiters have long-standing, like decades-long relationships with these people, and they know where they've been. They know, everything about them. That vetting process is really important.
Yeah.
And then in addition to that, once we've decided on making that hire, also, checking their credentials and vetting, like doing all of that, those background checks. So that's really important. I don't want to say most of it, but that's a lot of it. Getting that information, that's just such a shortcut.
Data.
Yeah, that data, it's just such a shortcut. Whereas before I would have done it I would have hired somebody to save that money on the recruiting fee. And then that person would be like 3, 6, 8, a year in. And it's just that you realized how much you've lost with the wrong person. So that's the first thing is you have to invest in, in the correct people, in finding the correct people. But look, when it comes to leadership at a high level, the one thing that I look for stuff that I'm not so great at. And so the first thing is just organizational skills. So I'm not the most organized guy. I've got like ADD. So, I'm thinking about one opportunity, I'm already on the next one. So I'm bouncing around a lot just in my head about, different things that I want to do. And you need a leader who's very disciplined and who's super, super organized. And, you need someone who's got the right attitude. You need somebody who appreciates culture. You need somebody who's mature. One of the biggest disconnects between what I do and now, if you ask me what my title is, I'm a co-founder. So I'm not a CEO, I'm not an executive, but one of the biggest disconnects, and this is leading to what I look for in a leader, is one of the biggest disconnects I have is that when, let's say myself and a CEO sit down and we discuss strategy and we agree on strategy with whoever the stakeholders are at that kind of decision making, that high level strategy level. When we decide on what to do, the most important thing a CEO can do is then take that, go into the organization, go into like the organizational chart, and assign the correct HR assets, the human resources, the correct people onto the tasks, create the workflows, and making sure that all the checks and balances are there. That's the biggest disconnect. The biggest disconnect is from ideation to actual execution. So the CEO has to be, as much as that CEO has to be a strategic thinker, strategy is important, but execution is of the utmost importance, because in order to expand your interests as a business person, you potentially will have multiple businesses, or you will have multiple, let's say, divisions or product offerings within a business. You have to have leadership that is able to execute on what it is that you collectively decide is the strategy. So what I look for in a leader is, when in a CEO, I look for someone who is able to execute and who's able to keep things tight with the team, and who's able to, they have to have a good demeanor. They have to have a professional demeanor, because ultimately I know that people are going to have to follow them, and people have to, the same way that this CEO is entrusting me with their career, I have to know that the people that report to the CEO, that those people will entrust the CEO with their career as well.
What I heard you just say there was the importance of like that CEO really having that strategic ability to sort of drive the business, right? Call it from a place of scaling or growth, or ensuring that there's consistency in the business. But there's even more talent when it comes down to getting the people in the organization to do that, making sure that their ability to communicate the idea or the strategy in order to win the hearts and minds of the team and the individuals, and assigning the right individuals and getting the right talent in place is even more important. And I totally agree with that. I absolutely think the biggest mistake CEOs make is having that disconnect, or the inability to now go and get the people moving in that position.
A buddy of mine told me a saying, and it makes a lot of sense. You can work on the business, or you can work in the business. So the CEO works in the business. The entrepreneur works on the business. And having a CEO, and the reason that Valeria and I decided to have a CEO was because we wanted someone to work in the business, to operate the business, quite frankly, better than we can, because there are professional operators and professional CEOs who will just do a better job than we do. For me, it's hard to sit and put it in a schedule like the quarterly reviews or the annual reviews and all. So there's a lot of different things that requires a high level of organization. So a CEO works in the business, which is, I can't tell you that working in or on is more or less important.
Right.
The CEO is obviously, everybody's super important, because they're all working in the business. Having various levels of management, having all kinds of staff, it allows an entrepreneur to work on the business, because it's just really hard to do. Now, you have to marry the two. There has to be a bridge between the two. So let's say between me and our CEO, that bridge has to exist, because she's executing, and that executional knowledge, she'll pick out strategy from there that I can't possibly get just by reading. So by reading or consuming whatever I consume, or by whatever I do. So it's that back and forth dialogue that has to happen.
That relationship. Yeah.
So she has to then come back and tell me operationally, here are some, whether there are issues or potential optimizations. And then we can, so we have both sides of the coin. So I just feel like, and I've had so many difficulties in my career when I had this notion that I have to be everything and I have to do everything, and the buck stops at me, and I'm the guy, and I have to do everything. I have to be the accountant and the janitor and all that. And that's a great notion when you're starting out, because you have this ego that you should be able to do everything.
Well, in the beginning you do have to, and then eventually you either build, or you keep doing all of that.
You can take partners. You can take partners who can do stuff that you can't do.
Yeah, you could hire people that can do stuff that you can't do.
If you have the money,
Yeah.
But initially, typically you're a one-man show in the beginning, and that's what I was early on in my career.
Right. So on that note, how wise is it to hire a CEO? How do you know you should hire a CEO? How did you know? Here's a really good question. How did you know that you got to a stage, you kind of answered it earlier where you said we need to work on top of the business, but when was that moment for you when you said, you know what, I think we're at this stage now?
It depends on the business. When I realized that two things. One is I suck at certain things, and being at the top of an organization that requires a lot of kind of granular management, I suck at, number one. Number two, my time can be used better.
Right.
For me to exploit my strengths.
Okay.
So my time, if it's ideating with Valeria, as in the example of Valeria, ideating with Valeria around content concepts, because content drives that business, right?
Right.
If it's getting on a plane with Valeria and the kids and going somewhere and creating content remotely because
or just being with them,
right? So I'm at a different stage, right? I'm 48 years old, so for me, my time, the way I look at my time isn't just about how much money can I squeeze out of every minute.
Right.
How can I convert every minute to money? I have other currencies now. I have my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my children, my health. So when hiring a CEO, you're looking at things like, how can I maximize how can I get the most amount of, both utility and purpose and pleasure out of my time.
Right.
So you hire for that. But I'm at a very different stage, and depending on who's listening to this, when I was starting out, my time was all business because I didn't have a wife and I didn't have kids. So there's a time and place for everything.
Right.
But I would say when to hire, not just the CEO, when to hire anyone. Let me back it up, because the CEO, we keep talking about that, but that's just one. That's just one role.
Yeah,
that's
we
just
got stuck in that job, but
that's just the role that's, I think, the most kind of that gets like
sexy.
It's a sexy role,
Right.
But like, for example, when Valeria started out, and it's interesting to talk about kind of the genesis of this particular business. Valeria started out, she started making YouTube videos unbeknownst to me, and then all of a sudden a fairly large check appeared in our bank account. And I was like, I asked Valeria, what is this? And she said, well, this is, somebody just paid me to put on some lipstick. And I'm like, huh, what? Like, what are you doing? She goes, oh, I made YouTube videos. And I said, well, let me see. So she showed it to me, and I think the videos have tens of thousands of views. So I said, okay. I said,
what year was this, by the way?
Late 16.
Okay. So
I said to her, I go, well, so these people sent you money. Okay, cool. Because I didn't know where the money came from. And I said, how'd you learn how to edit videos? You don't know how to, you don't have any, like, how do you know?
Yeah.
She goes, I just went to YouTube and I did a search for how to edit videos. And I said, and that's it? She goes, yeah, just whatever program is in my MacBook, I just put the video file in there. I started slicing it up and I just started editing videos. I said, okay, cool. So when I saw that the money came in, that first payment came in, and this is back to like hiring people and scaling a business in general, I said to her, okay, well, now that that's, I feel that that's proved it out. And I said, do you mind if I take a look at the data? Can you share your, can I log in and look at YouTube? So I logged in, and
because you know a lot about the industry at this point as well.
I mean,
like, you come from the world of digital and
I have experience in digital,
the internet business.
Right? I have experience in media. And I looked at the content, and I looked at the data, and I said, yeah, this is obviously, first of all, the first proof point is that somebody paid for it.
Right.
The second proof point is that, well, not proof point, but the second thing is I looked at it, and looking at the data within the media, things like click-through rates, retention numbers, watch times, like, this is real media. So the fact that this is real media, I said, we need to create more of it. So, Valeria and I identified that we need more volume. So going back to your question about how do you know when to hire a CEO, I'm flipping that question a little and say, how do you know when to hire anyone? Yeah. And I said to Valeria, I said, tell me about your day. Explain to me what you do all day. And she said, I spend an hour a day in front of the camera, and I spend 9 hours a day editing. And the only reason she spends 9 hours a day editing is because she doesn't know how to edit, and she just started learning. So she said, that's what I do. I said, great, let's hire a full-time editor to work, 8 hours a day. And then instead of you being on the in front of the camera for an hour a day, be in front of the camera 8 hours a day. And then have the editor create content. Valeria's first response was, you're insane. She goes, it's a lot of money. We have to hire a full-time person. And, when we had a very frank talk about it, and I said, well, look, I mean, yeah, there's a certain amount of risk involved, but if you're just going to hire this person and then relax, then no, it doesn't make sense. Right. But if we're hiring this person, and you're going to actually spend your full day in front of the camera or ideating around content concepts and create more content and post it to Instagram and YouTube, then this person is worth it, because my speculation is that more sponsors will come. So that's how you know when to hire people.
But what advice would you give yourself today, starting out in your career?
I would say be more patient. It's the same advice I give myself today. So the projects that I have are not where I want them to be. So it's the same advice as I give myself today. But now I have experience. That's the difference. So I would tell myself, be patient, work through it, acknowledge that there are peaks and valleys. Don't get too high when there's a peak, and don't get too bummed out when there's a valley, because it's part of it. That's the advice I would give myself. You just have to be patient, and you have to continue putting pressure on everything every single day. And it's actually interesting because I draw the line now. I spent actually quite a bit of time in the stock market. And if you look at the stock market about companies' values that go up and down, it very much mimics everything in life, not just your own business. It definitely mimics your own business when you see like how even huge companies, they sometimes they go down, but just anything in life, there's good times, there's bad times. And the key to building anything of value, if we're using a business as an example, the key to building a business over time is that just constant daily pressure. It's the acknowledgement that there's going to be good times, there's going to be bad times, there's going to be wins, there's going to be losses. And the key is that you just have to keep going. And that's, to your point, one of my philosophies is that's the only way that I know. I know stories of people who at some point in their life, they were like, it's such a low point. They had such bad things happen. And then, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 years later, they're doing things that are just astronomical.
Okay, before we head into the next segment, we're going to take a quick little break and hear from our sponsor, the Better Human program. Okay, just before we jump into the next segment, we're going to take a quick little audio break and we're going to hear from our sponsor, the Better Human program. The Better Human program is a 10-week program that equips you with the tools to achieve success in every interaction with other humans. Learn assertiveness, effective communication, interpersonal skills, and take control of your life with the Better Human program. Check out the link below for all the description information. What are some important, back to the business, working together as a couple, how do you balance in your kids with this? How do you
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not easy, right? The kids are part of the business. They're in the content.
Yeah. Does it help having the kids part of the content? Like, does that give?
I just think it's unavoidable. I mean, if we're shooting at home, we're not going to, I don't know, go off into a corner and say, we've got to shoot over here.
Some people do.
Some people do. No, they do. I mean, I know, there are influencers who keep their kids out of it. I think kids are just, it would be completely inauthentic if the kids weren't in the content. The kids are a massive part of our life, and they're the most important thing to us, and we celebrate them every day. They're just awesome little dudes. So, yeah, I mean, is it a benefit? I think it's a benefit to them because they're learning about business, and they're understanding. They're starting to get an understanding now of kind of what's going on and what we do. And I think that if you project to the future as to what the world's going to look like, by my estimate, by the time they're teens and in their 20s or whatever it may be, the world's going to be a lot different from kind of a media perspective and from a privacy perspective. I think that we're giving them an asset that they wouldn't get otherwise. Just being immersed and being around when we have conversations. We talk to them like adults. It's actually funny. Today, I was mentioning to you before we got on that I went and I bought Roblox stock today, and they're like huge fan of Roblox. It's this like company that just went public, and I asked them their opinion, and I said, because I read an article that the biggest challenge with Roblox is that for them to get 20-plus-year-olds into it, and they're 8 and 6, and I said, do you guys think that older people will play it too? And they're like, oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like when we're going to be in our 20s, we'll play whatever.
My 4-year-old asked me to download the app from the other day.
Yeah, be careful with it because
I didn't.
It takes over your house. Our eldest, he got into our iTunes account, and I thought the setting was that he couldn't make any purchases without a password, and the setting meant that he couldn't download an app that you have to pay for the download, but in-app purchases he can do.
No problem.
$1,000.
Oh no.
So yeah, there's some pitfalls there. Look, how we integrate the children, we're just really open with them and really honest with them, and I think that the asset that we're creating for them in terms of their own personal brands and their exposure to the world, I think is going to serve them. I think that having them be on camera and then having them see the result of their work, even at this age, is great. I think that the YouTube channel that we're going to create for them is going to allow me to start going over high level metrics and just data points with them. and really make the connection between work and freedom, like the work and the results that they get, and then what they get because of that. So, I think the lessons for them are great. So I think they're developing good skills.
How can someone become a digital entrepreneur and actually make a living out of it?
Same thing it takes to build any business. I mean, there's no, I'm not in digital because I feel it can be built faster than something else. It just happens to be what I know. And it's just what I know. It's what I've always done. But I think it's the same thing. Like I know people who have home services businesses that created tens of millions of dollars in value for themselves in a relatively short amount of time. So I don't think there's necessarily an advantage, to digital. But I mean, if you're talking about digital, I think that if we're talking about digital, there are certain key components. One is you have to have a really good eye for content. You have to have a good blend of qualitative analysis to identify what's good content and what kind of content provides value, and then you have to have a quantitative mind as well, where you're looking at data analytics. So having those two, both the quantity and the quality, and marrying those two, and constantly looking at data as it pertains to the distribution of quality content. That's really the key in digital right now. In digital, in all aspects of digital, whether it's online retailing, media of any kind of production work, everything really is about building content and building audience. That's where the world is right now. So again, it's the combination of qualitative, in terms of content, quantitative in terms of data analysis, and fusing those two together. So it's two sides of the brain, and a lot of the times it's good to have, if you have a partner that's strong in one, and you're strong in the other, and being able to communicate with that person, I think is key.
Okay, so that was the end of the deep dive segment. We are going to take a quick little break and hear from our sponsor again before we head into the most awaited segment of the Better Human podcast. It's called the Better Human Takeaway. Okay, just before we jump into the next segment, we're going to take a quick little audio break and we're going to hear from our sponsor, the Better Human program. The Better Human program is a 10-week program that equips you with the tools to achieve success in every interaction with other humans. Learn assertiveness, effective communication, interpersonal skills, and take control of your life with the Better Human program. Check out the link below for all the description information. Okay, welcome on back. We are here in the final section with our one and only Gary, and we got a few questions we're going to jump into. So, what is the one question I didn't ask you today that I should have asked you?
Why didn't you quit?
Let's go with that. Why didn't you quit? In all of your businesses, in parenting, in your relationship, in everything. Why don't you quit?
Because there's no alternative. So quit and do what?
Right.
You'd just be starting all over again. So there is no quitting because it's not possible. So when you quit, let's say you get to a certain level in something, in anything, it doesn't matter what it is, and you quit, then you just start from zero. So quitting is actually, it's counterintuitive because quitting just puts you at an even worse position, not a better position. So when your back's against the wall, you become something else. And I'll give you a quick example. I had a dog, and I think we talked about this last time I was here. I don't know if you remember. And this was the gentlest dog, and he was great. And he was scared of plastic bags. So when you shake a plastic bag, he was scared of that noise. And I was a kid, and I backed him into a corner. He was the most gentle dog, and I backed him into a corner. He had nowhere to go, and it was me, right? I was like, I grew up with him, and he showed his teeth, and he snapped at me. So when someone is in a situation where they have no way out, that's when a transformation happens.
Right.
So you asked me why didn't I ever quit? Because my back was always against the wall and I never had a way out. So I never quit, and that's how I became who I became. So no quitting is not only because there's no alternative, but because it makes you who you are. It creates the human being that's going to succeed.
Right.
So if there's going back to your third question about what's the takeaway, the better human takeaway is put yourself in a situation with no way out.
Right.
Because then what you do is you fight. And when you fight, you become the human, you become the optimal person that you can be. Is when you fight. I look at people who have failed. I don't like to use the word fail because maybe they're happy in some things, but they would consider themselves, let's say somebody would consider I failed in something. Those are people who had alternatives. People who don't have alternatives
don't fail.
They succeed. I don't know why, but they always do.
Yeah.
People who don't have alternatives always succeed because there's no other choice. If you look at entrepreneurs, you know, it's like a common story. Started from nothing. Nobody helped me.
Had to do it myself. Had to fight my way through.
I didn't have a dad, or I didn't have this, or we were poor, or this and that. And all those people took themselves from very, very, I don't know. Like, yeah, you'll get guys like the Winklevosses coming out sometimes, and well, I built this, I came from this, like I was rowing, and
but it was all supported.
And that's cool, and I'm not taking anything away from them because they did a great job too. But you
rare.
don't hear that story that often. You don't hear the story of, well, my dad was, my family was worth $500 million, and I took them to $5 billion. You don't hear that a lot.
Right.
You hear the story of, we had nothing, we were screwed, and I made something of myself. You know what I mean? So it's that's the takeaway, I think.
That's good, man. That's really good. Okay, I'm going to ask you the last question, which is, what does the word better human mean to you, and how do you think we can all achieve it? And you've started to answer that with what you just did.
It means to me, it's the version of yourself that you are happy with. That's the better human. It's not what other people think of you, because that's irrelevant. You won't please them. So if you're chasing approval and validation outside of your own skin, you're never going to get it, ever. So being a better human is understanding that external validation is useless, and being happy with who you are. To me, that's the ultimate kind of better human, is being happy with who you are and not caring what other people think of you.
Gary, you are the man, my friend. Where can the audience find you? Where could they get in touch with you?
I'm usually hanging out with my kids and my wife, but if you want to find me on Instagram, it's just Gary Lipovetsky. You can just go there, and you can see my stuff there. I don't spend a lot of time there, but I put out some stuff. Yeah. I actually like to film my wife. Kind of when she doesn't know. Like the other day, we were in the car and she was mad at me because she hadn't had coffee yet.
Silent treatment.
Yeah, that thing has like 50,000 views. I love it.
Right,
I called it marriage math. No coffee plus wife equals silent treatment.
Right. That was a good one. You know what? And actually, I do watch your stuff, or I see you put out a lot of stuff in regard to Insta, and I know you're modest and stuff, but people reach out to you a lot. They send you a lot of messages.
They do.
And I know you are very responsive and you are always giving back. So, take that win. That's amazing. You are a better human, man. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Greg.
All right. Listen, if you like today's episode, don't forget to click that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share. And don't forget to comment. And we will see you next time. Hey, I'm Greg Witz. Thanks so much for coming and checking out the video. If you like that video, you're going to love the next one. So I'd highly suggest that you click this video over here. And don't forget to subscribe and share.